President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu are facing off against Iran, and we're between negotiations and war as the Revolutionary Guards simulate closing the Strait of Hormuz in a large-scale naval military exercise. The American response includes maneuvers by the American strike group off the coast of Iran as the United States Navy continues to deploy assets to the region and increases pressure on Tehran. But the Iranians are also pushing back and aiming high in negotiations with the United States. And ahead of the second round of talks with the United States, Iran's foreign minister landed in Geneva on Monday, but the Ayatollah regime is not backing down from its rhetorical threats, telling the American president that if you choose confrontation, it will be a deterrent lesson. And in related news, there is growing evidence that the regime is carrying out a silent massacre and trying unsuccessfully to hide it. So Tehran is sending a defiant message that Hezbollah is recovering, Hamas will not disarm, and Iran will not give up its nuclear rights. America is not pressed, and Israel is preparing for the situation. Are we days away from a major war? Welcome to Boots on the Ground. I'm your host, Yair Pinto, bringing you the whole truth about what's happening in Israel and in the Middle East. The United States is reinforcing its military power in the Middle East with a second aircraft carrier battle group and several other vessels. This represents a very large percentage of the deployed operational naval force. It is a move intended to deter Iran, ensure freedom of navigation in the Red Sea, and prepare for a regional escalation. The need for this was demonstrated on Monday when the IRGC conducted an exercise in which they practiced taking over ships on the strategic shipping lane of the Persian Gulf. In response, 7 United States vessels, including the aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln, guided missile destroyers, and supply ships, sailed in formation in the Arabian Sea. The maneuvers and shows of force are taking place ahead of another round of talks with the United States this week, as United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio admitted it's not simple to reach an agreement with Tehran. On that note, the campaign around Iran's nuclear program is entering a particularly sensitive stage, as a new round of talks in Geneva, mediated by Oman, threats from Washington and Tehran, and American military preparedness is signaling that the military option is not coming off the table anytime soon. Iran's foreign minister, Arakshi, met with the Director General of the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, and warned on X, "We will not surrender to threats." The Americans need to show politically seriousness. Against this backdrop, American officials leaked that Trump made clear to Netanyahu in their meeting at the Mar-a-Lago last December that the United States would support Israeli strikes against Iran's ballistic missile program if no agreement is reached between Washington and Tehran. However, things have changed since then, and Iran is on the verge of a historic decision between a Syria-style deterioration and a planned transition program. In the shadow of galloping inflation, collapsing banks, and tens of thousands of fatalities in January's street demonstrations in Iran, the battle over the day after the Revolutionary Guards has already begun. But what about Israel? In the Israeli Air Force, they assess that Iran has 1,800 missiles in 4 arenas simultaneously. So, what awaits Israel in the case of a strike? We will take a closer look. And meanwhile, in response to Hamas's ceasefire violations in the Gaza Strip, the IDF eliminated several terrorists this week. And amidst these activities, Prime Minister Netanyahu said that he's giving a chance to the 20-point plan of United States President Donald Trump. But if necessary, the war will be renewed in order to disarm Hamas for good. And furthermore, the IDF is reinforcing forces in Judea and Samaria out of concern that Iran will try to ignite the area and open a front that will divert pressure from it. In the defense establishment, they warn of a possible escalation. So, while Hamas refuses to disarm and Hezbollah continues to arm itself with Iranian money, and Iran is weighing war or a deal, in the IDF they understand another round is not a question of if, but of when, and at what intensity. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report, bringing you the whole truth about what's happening in Israel and day 863 of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shia militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region that are taking their orders from the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps in Iran, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. And a moment before we start, I want to call on you to continue and spread the truth. Share, follow us. And if you want more content about what's happening every day in Israel, search for Yair Pinto, TBN, and Mati Shoshani on social media platforms. Make sure to only follow official accounts. And don't forget to press that subscribe button on YouTube so that you always tune in to the truth. On Monday, in the Strait of Hormuz, the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps Navy launched a large-scale exercise, calling it Smart Control of the Strait of Hormuz. And according to reports from Tehran, they are simulating control of the maritime passage, including scenarios of taking over vessels in the most sensitive shipping corridor of the world. So, is this only a message for the negotiations in Geneva, or preparation for an escalation that will reshuffle the cards on the ground? Maybe both. In any case, this exercise comes a day before the renewal of talks between Iran and the United States in Geneva that are supposed to take place indirectly and with Omani mediation. On the American side, these are the same names from the previous round, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. On the Iranian side, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has already landed in Switzerland and will meet with the IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi. But behind the smiles and the handshakes in the field, strong signals are being sent. Because while the IRGC Navy was simulating a closure of the Hormuz, Washington wordlessly answers with a military exercise of its own. In the Arabian Sea, off the coast of Oman, the strike group of the aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln displayed an orderly maneuver of 7 vessels in a single formation. The message that this sends is clear. The strike group is close by, highly trained, and also capable with a rapid response capabilities. But that's not the only message that the American Navy sent the IRGC this week. Another United States carrier battle group centered on the Gerald Ford, which is the world's largest warship, is moving towards the eastern Mediterranean and is expected to be in position off the coast of the Syria area within about 2 weeks. This gives President Trump even more options to strike Iran, even if no one says it out loud. The scale of this deployment is unusual, and according to figures cited by the analysts, this is nearly a third of the United States deployed operational naval force worldwide, concentrated in one area, the Mediterranean Sea, the Red Sea, and the Persian Gulf. And at the same time, there is a deployment of additional squadrons of aircraft bases in this region, including in Qatar, Jordan, Syria, and Cyprus. And in the defense layer, THAAD and Patriot batteries have been deployed to defend American bases and their allies, including Israel, but also Jordan and Saudi Arabia, against the possible Iranian missile barrages. Circling back to the most sensitive element in this situation, the Iranians do not have a card that they can play other than closing the Strait of Hormuz. This is a global bottleneck for oil and liquefied natural gas shipments, totaling nearly 100 ships going back and forth every 24 hours. And any blockage there, even temporarily, would send shockwaves throughout the global economy. In response to Monday's IRGC Navy exercises, the United States issued a statement that it accepts the Iranian exercise to be conducted in a safe and professional manner, and warned against unsafe behavior such as low flights over vessels, armed flights with intentions that are unclear, or weapons aimed at the American forces. everyone understands that although this is only an exercise, it could easily escalate into a real incident, as has happened in the past. And amidst all of this activity, President Trump said that if the talks do not bear fruit, it will be a bad day for Iran. He also explained while he's sending another aircraft carrier, saying, in case we don't reach a deal, we'll need it. He added that if Iran doesn't want to get hit, it needs to make a deal. But he also responded to the question about regime change in Iran by saying, it seems like the best thing that could happen would be that the regime will change. That seemingly casual remark landed like a hammer blow on the ears of the Ayatollah regime, and also everybody else that heard it. However, Secretary of State Marco Rubio quickly lowered the temperature, telling reporters that the president prefers a diplomatic solution, but it is very difficult to reach a deal with Tehran. He also explained, well, there is a force that is building up now, saying that Iran has already shown capability and willingness to strike the American presence in this region, and therefore, there needs to be sufficient firepower to prevent a mistake that could slide into something much broader. And at the same time, he repeated the familiar bottom line: Iran will not be allowed to possess a nuclear weapon. For their part, Iranian leaders also repeated familiar lines, and Deputy Foreign Minister Majid Ravkhanchi says that Iran is willing to consider compromises, but only if the Americans are willing to talk about lifting the sanctions. He presented what he described as a willingness to show flexibility in the form of a possibility to dilute the enriched uranium to a level of 60%, which is still technically very close to a weapons-grade level. He also repeated that there is no chance that the regime will agree to zero enrichment or even discuss its ballistic missiles. In his view, the missiles saved the regime, and he sarcastically asked how it is possible to agree to strip defensive capabilities. Regarding the stockpile of enriched uranium estimated at more than 400 kilograms, he said it is too early to determine what will happen next. So, once again, the regime's narrative is unchanged. They are willing to talk about the nuclear issue, but not their missiles or the support for the terror proxy groups. Regime officials also continue to make ridiculous threats. The commander of the Iranian Navy speaks about high alert and round-the-clock monitoring. Members of Iran's parliament use harsh language and warn that the regime will become a grave for attackers in the event of a strike against Iran. And even the commanders of Iran's regular army sent a personal message to President Trump that any confrontation will be a lesson that will prevent him from continuing to walk around in arrogance. Should these threats be taken seriously by the Americans or by anybody else? Let me know what you think about this in the comment section. I'm curious to hear. And here, not in Israel, in Nashville, Tennessee, we're mainly concerned with the issue of Iran's ballistic missiles. Yes, Mati and I came here to the NRB convention for a few days, but we're still reporting about what's happening in Israel. So, according to the Israeli Air Force, the arsenal includes about 1,800 missiles, and the scenario being discussed is a confrontation on 4 fronts simultaneously. There is also another significant factor, a media report that Trump made clear to Netanyahu already in December in their meeting at the Mar-a-Lago that the United States would support Israel with strikes against the ballistic missile program if no agreement is reached. Since then, according to the same report, internal discussions have been taking place in the United States about how to help. This might include aerial refueling aircrafts and obtaining overflight approvals in countries along the route. But here there is a complication, because Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates have already stated publicly that they will not allow the use of their airspace for strikes against Iran. And meanwhile, there is a report about American efforts to reduce Iranian oil exports to China, which is a major source for income for the regime in Iran, despite giving Chinese customers a huge discount on the globally traded price per barrel. And while all of this pressure is coming on the regime from the outside, pressure from its own population is also boiling up from within. Reliable reports speak of hundreds of protesters who were sentenced to death in the last 2 weeks alone in an online fast-track trials with almost no possibility of defense. There's also a claim that families of more than 3,000 detainees received notices of their relatives' demise, and some were required to pay a ransom to receive the remains for burial. This is on top of the thousands who were unalive during the protests in January, including many who were summarily executed in custody after being arrested. And regime officials have denied all of this. But the evidence that they are lying is undeniable. Videos of street protests continue to leak out of Iran, showing protesters burning symbols of the regime, including banks and headquarters of the besieged. Yair calls in the streets a sense of abandonment. And also you hear protesters talking about expecting American assistance that did not come, and a feeling that they were betrayed. While there are also reports that many injured people avoided going to hospitals out of fear they would be arrested or worse. And meanwhile, Iran's economy is still in ruins. It's still facing water shortages and terrible air quality, and its currency is still worthless. So, with all of that going on, Iran's diplomats arrived in Geneva facing pressures at sea, in the air, at home, and online, while time is running out and the American diplomats repeat that they must either agree to a deal or face overwhelming forces. This week, we could see events overtaking the diplomats as we are one mistake away from an explosion. I'm Yair Pinto, and I'm bringing you the whole truth about what's happening in the Middle East. And if you want more information, make sure to hit that subscribe button or search for TBN on social media, Yair Pinto, Mati Shoshani, but only follow official accounts and become ambassadors of the truth. Share this content with as many people as possible and pray. And speaking of sharing, I want to speak to you about just a moment about an opportunity to take part in something that is rooted deep in the land and in the heart. We are relaunching the Rebuild Israel campaign. It continues. We're bringing life back to Israel's north. Along Israel's northern border, an era marked by war, by displacement, and by loss. We are planting an apple orchard, not as a symbol for a single moment, but as part of a long-term commitment to rebuild what was damaged. This orchard is more than just agriculture. It creates jobs for local families, and it helps communities return and rebuild, sending a clear message to the people of Israel: you are not alone. When you donate, you are not just giving, you are rebuilding. Your support puts trees on the ground, restores the livelihoods of people, and transforms the land that was scarred by war into a land that grows again. This is how renewal takes fruit and Israel rebuilds after war. Join us in restoring the north and strengthening the future of the land of Israel. Go now to tbn.org/rebuildisrael or call 800-804-7895. That's Rebuild Israel at tbn.org/rebuildisrael. Rebuild the land, restore hope, bless the future. And now we are switching our focus to the Gaza Strip because the Air Force operated there over the last 24 hours and eliminated several terrorists after they violated the ceasefire agreement. Amongst those eliminated was a Nukhba terrorist who took part in the October 7th raid. This is a localized incident on the ground, but it sits on a much bigger story. The question now is sharp. Are we on the way to a real disarmament of Hamas, or to another round of war, struggle, broader, and also more decisive against the terrorist organization? And in the background, all eyes are still on Iran, and regional tension is at its all-time peak. But within this noise, Hamas is quietly trying to build time in order to avoid disarming and giving up its weapons, and otherwise retain the ability to make a comeback in the future. In Jerusalem, they say this time it won't end with words alone. Cabinet Secretary Yossi set a clear deadline. Within 60 days, Hamas must disarm of all its weapons, including rifles. But if that doesn't happen, IDF soldiers will have to make sure it happens. This is not a hinted threat, but sharp warnings and a defined objective as the clock starts running out. If the defense establishment is stating that they also see a broader picture coming up, that Hamas is trying to rearm, and Hamas, according to the understandings in Israel, does not want to disarm at all because it is counting on the big regional picture to distract everybody. But Israeli officials say, forget all of that. There is no confusion here, and the deal is simple. Hamas disarms, or we'll see a return to intense war in the Gaza Strip. And at the same time, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu explained publicly why Israel cannot allow itself to settle for quiet. Hamas still has the tunnels in the Gaza Strip, although the Prime Minister said that the IDF destroyed about 50 kilometers worth of tunnels, but we need to complete the job. This is necessary so Hamas cannot hide weapons, laboratories, stockpiles of ammunition. Then Netanyahu added the sentence that defines the period. He's giving a chance to an agreement, to the 20-point plan of the United States President Donald Trump. But if necessary, the war will be renewed in order to disarm Hamas. This means full demilitarization, not only a ceasefire, but a reality in which there are no weapons, no terror infrastructures, and no ability to attack Israel again in a year or in 2 years. He added that Israel knows the cost of war. We hope this will be achieved the easy way. But this goal must be achieved one way or another. And meanwhile, the American side message arrived that connects exactly to this point. President Trump wrote ahead of the convening of the Peace Council that he intends to announce an investment of $5 billion of humanitarian efforts and the rehabilitation of Gaza. He also spoke about a large international stabilization force and about a local policing force of police in Gaza. And in the same breath, he declared that Hamas must fulfill its commitments to full and immediate disarmament. Furthermore, within this international effort, countries are already signaling that they want a part. Italy announced recently that it is ready to train a new police force in Gaza, and also it is ready to be an observer in Trump's Peace Council initiative. From Israel's perspective, this is an indication that the discussion about the day after is already happening as we speak, but it depends on one condition: Hamas without weapons. And now, after the eliminations on the ground and the political deadline, the message also reaches Hamas and the whole region. Time is up. In 60 days, we will know whether Hamas truly disarms or whether the IDF returns to Gaza at full intensity to close the story for good. And I, Yair Pinto, will be here to report to you from the ground and to bring you what's really happening in Israel. So keep spreading the truth, share, follow us, and most importantly, do not forget to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. And speaking of boots on the ground, Commando Brigade soldiers have been operating in recent days in Judea and Samaria in intensive arrest activities against inciters and against those about whom there is information that they intend to carry out a terrorist attack against Israel. At the same time, in the IDF, they are reinforcing the Judea and Samaria division with additional forces, sending a clear message that we are entering a very sensitive period. Why now? And what is the risk? It's because the Muslim holy month of Ramadan is approaching, and Iran is looking for the ignition point that will set the arena ablaze at the most explosive time. In the IDF and in the defense establishment, they warn Iran could try to ignite Judea and Samaria under the cover of the Ramadan month, create a front that will keep the IDF busy, draw global attention, and distract attention away from the discourse around Iran. In the military, they say that the month of Ramadan this year could be a challenging and different compared to all the last 2 years because of the variety of factors. The IDF is preparing for all scenarios, from a lone attacker who carries out a ramming or a stabbing attack to organized preparations for major attacks. And in the defense establishments, they also point to another friction point, as today there are dozens of terrorists at large in the area, including many who were released in exchange for Israeli hostages that are held in the Gaza Strip over the last 2 years. And at the same time, on the Palestinian street, there is also an expectation that Israel will open crossings and allocate work permits after more than 2 years of closure. On that note, it's important to understand that many Palestinians are living with great economic distress as well as pressure that is caused by tense waiting that is felt both in Gaza and in the Iranian arena, which could affect the streets. A military source noted that Hamas in Gaza is trying to encourage the Palestinian street in Judea and Samaria to act. Also, the Palestinian Authority is under its own pressure because it wants to carry out reforms and show that it is capable of functioning, especially as talk rises about the day after in the Gaza Strip. And meanwhile, the IDF is also preparing for sensitive events during the Ramadan period, including a pilgrimage at Joseph's tomb, events at the Cave of the Patriarchs, and at Rachel's tomb, and also the Purim celebration events, each of which requires more security and control in the field. And the defense establishment warns of another explosive source, nationalist crime in Judea and Samaria. But one incident that gets out of control can change the entire reality. In the IDF, criticism is also heard toward the police regarding the handling of this issue. And in the background of all of this, Iran is broadcasting a double message: readiness for negotiations on the nuclear issue, and even willingness for monthly or daily oversight by the International Atomic Energy Agency, but refusal to give up enrichment and refusal to discuss missiles. At the same time, it threatens. If force is used against it, it will strike American bases in the region, and declares that Hezbollah has recovered despite losing about 3,000 people, including most of its leadership and most of its strategic weapons. When Hamas refuses to disarm and Hezbollah continues to arm itself with Iranian money, in the IDF they understand the next round is not a question of if, but of when and at what intensity. The question now is, who will light the first match? And is there anyone who will stop it in time? One thing you don't have to wonder about is that here at TBN Israel, we will report about everything. So keep spreading the truth, share, follow us. Most importantly, pray. This is a spiritual war. We need your help in praying. So pray for wisdom to our leaders, to your leaders, to all the allied soldiers, if it's the IDF, the United States, that are moving into this region, into the danger zone. Pray for them to have safety, to have wisdom. Pray for all the enemies of Israel, not to succeed, but to have a change of heart. Keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.